So now we have a new moderator up here, Ivan Kuo. Has been creating tremendous value for gamification.co and is part of what makes this conference possible. And he will be leading the next panel talk about consulting and gamification. Here you go. All right, he has his technology too.
Everybody hear me? I project? No, yes you can. Hello, my name is Ivan Kuo and I'm the managing editor of gamification.co. I help organize this event as well as all the media that we're covering on our blog and the magazine you've all received today or yesterday. I'd like to introduce my panelists first, but could you all come to the stage, please? My panelists, and take your 4 seats. Hold on 1 second. Cool trick. All right, perfect. Now, panelists, in the most effective way I can believe this can be done, I'd like for all you to introduce yourselves in a quick 30-second pitch. So please, could you start?
Sure. Hi all, my name is Sascha Goto. I'm a senior program associate with McKinsey. I've been 10 years with the firm and I've just started this year to gamify an internal program that we do.
Hi, I'm Thomas Hsu with Accenture. I'm part of our internal social collaboration team, and my role is focused on how we motivate and enable all 250,000 of our employees to collaborate more effectively. I also lead and facilitate our internal community of practice for gamification.
Hello everyone, my name is Naureen Meraj. I'm the global head for our gamification and employee engagement division at NTT Data. And for those of you who don't know, NTT Data, we're the 6th largest IT service company in the world. But about a year and a half ago, we started our gamification division. I, by no means, am a technologist. I'm actually a behavioral psychologist. But as we started to establish our gamification division, we realized that's a really critical component within that realm. And now we have about a good 15 people on our team with all different backgrounds, including mine, in psychology, as well as our game design and business analysts and whatnot. So that's us.
My name is Bart. I'm from Belgium. I'm Director Service for CTG, a international ICT service company. We don't have a separate gamification division because we believe that gamification should be applied in all our business units. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm an economist, and that's why I also believe in gamification from another perspective.
All right, thank you, panelists. Now, before we begin, I'd like to just start by saying that not everyone on this panel is explicitly a consultant, but they've all had extensive experience in implementing gamification strategies, so they will have all the unique insights that you'll want from this panel. All right, and let's begin with this question. So panel, what are some of the unique challenges of using gamification as a general strategy? Given the general resistance to the name and the frequent misinformation about the concept itself, how do you even approach proposing gamification as a potential strategy? Sascha?
Sure. So obviously gamification has come a long way since the past 2-3 years. And when we began gamifying the program, which is around testing technology within the company, we sent out a survey just to find out, as a temperature check, what is it that people feel when they actually hear the word gamification? And luckily, 76% were either excited or at least curious about the topic. They were also, of course, curious as to, there were also negative comments. Obviously, some people said, oh, please do not turn this program into some kind of World of Warcraft, right? But the survey then went on and explained game mechanics, potential rewards, and team play components.
So at Accenture, we view gamification as part of a larger behavior shaping framework. I think that's what it's really about. It's one tool, and we use it in conjunction with other tools, proven techniques that we know work, proven change management techniques like sponsorship, communications, training, as well as what research tells us about social influence, social dynamics, all the science behind gamification. And so that's how we position it. It's one tool, it's an important one, but it's part of something larger, and it should be thought of as part of something larger.
Similarly, at NTT Data, we also realize that gamification on its own is meaningless if it's not applied in the right way. So we offer it as a wedge offering, and although we have our own division, basically there's to help people understand what gamification is, really understand, when we talk to others, really understand where they're coming from and their understanding, educate them, and then help them understand how, as a wedge offering, we can enhance the other services that we have to offer.
I'm a little bit surprised with Sascha's meaning that we have come a long way on gamification. I'm talking for Europe, and as I see we're not even started with gamification. The worst thing to start of a gamification project in Europe is calling it gamification, and that I learned through many failures calling it gamification. So maybe it's a cultural thing. I know we're behind that in Europe. I used to call it now a hands-on workshop. Gamification, hands-on workshop. That's what they buy, that's what they believe in, and then afterwards they say, hey, this was really a nice game and I learned a lot. That's gamification, don't use it up front. And playing games doesn't work in Europe. So I use hands-on workshop, and don't use the word games, I call it agile techniques. And then it's good.
Oh,
it's in the wording.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, as soon as you explain it better and break it down into the components that really stand behind this, namely providing transparency about your achievement, your progress, I think that is one of the key points really, then it becomes much more accepted. I mean, we've heard it a lot today that we should try to avoid the G word, but for these obvious reasons. At the end of the survey, actually 72%, when they, after they felt more comfortable with the word, actually agreed that they would potentially participate more in the program if it was gamified.
So obviously there's some sort of dichotomy with how people perceive gamification. Obviously in the US we've come a long way according to Sascha, but according to Bart, Europe still has a long way to go. Naureen, could you shed some light on how much time you spend educating your clients on gamification when you're proposing it as a strategy?
Sure, absolutely. As you had mentioned, there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstanding about what gamification is. So depending on who we're speaking to, I do try to get an understanding of where they're coming from. So if they already are within the understanding, understand the realm of gamification, what it does, then obviously there's less time. But usually I do like to spend a session or a workshop educating, whether it's our own internal team or a client, potential client. It could be anywhere from an hour to a few hours, but a workshop is always good because it gives us a chance to not only explain what it is, properly, and also show some examples and use cases of what it could be for for their own initiatives and objectives. So again, it just depends on what their needs are.
Great. Okay. Obviously, we have all heard that the G word's pretty shitty. I got it. It's been drilled into our heads all day. So Bart has come up with some terms for himself. Could the other three panelists shed some light on what alternative words you could use instead of gamification for your strategies? Thomas? Yeah.
So the question was, what do we refer to without using the word gamification?
Exactly.
As I said before, I think it's around behavior shaping. And I think it's putting it in the context of what are your business objectives and kind of the ROI, what are you trying to do? Tying behaviors to, I think one of the speakers talked about it this morning, right? You're driving certain behaviors and those behaviors are driving business value and business benefit. So I think if you talk about it in terms of motivation and behavior shaping, that's how I position it.
So a lot of the same tactics, behavior modification, motivation, but also we use the word engagement. So whether it's consumer engagement, employee engagement, that's one word that really gets everyone's attention because we all love to have everybody engaged in what we're doing.
No, this is a personal story that I had with CTG. I'm trying to sell gamification for years, even in my own company, and not always as successful as I wanted to be. And one point in time, our senior vice president saw that we had an issue with communication in the company. So we are a consulting company. He invited another consultancy company that helped, an outside view, and he said, we're going to do a workshop on actually team building. That's what he called it. He called it a team building about pizza delivery. And through that pizza delivery team building, we'll share some insights on how we communicate and how we can improve that. Afterwards, I said to him, you know what we've done today? Yeah, it was a team building, it was fun. No, this is gamification. We learned through a pizza delivery game a lot about communication. Putting the execs in a game and play it themselves. Don't call it a game, call it a team building, call the workshop, whatever. That made him seeing that this was actually much value and that it was gamification. It's the experience that counts.
Great. Okay. So, Bart, you definitely say you're a consultant for gamification, right? So if there's one thing I've noticed in regards to gamification consulting is that everyone suddenly feels qualified to be a gamification consultant. I'm sure some of you here have that on your very name tag. You're all from reputable sources and companies and have real experience as a consultant on this panel. So Bart, what separates you from the college grad with the Coursera certificate?
Engagement, probably. You have to believe in the concept that gaming delivers a better learning experience. And that's what I believe in. And those who experience that, and that's what you try to come to, have them experience the game, and then they will see that they learned a lot more. And it's more than just fun, because that's what people hear and remember if you're not in there. But let them experience themselves, and then they see it, that there is much more value in it, in the experience itself.
Right. Naureen, care to shed some light on that idea?
Did you have something more like specific targeted me, or just the same?
Oh, specifically, what makes you qualified as a consultant for gamification?
Well, so I've actually never, called myself a gamification consultant per se. I do a similar job, but I've always referred to myself as a behavioral psychologist because that is what I am. I go in and I assess the behaviors required to meet the objectives at hand. I think because that's such just an integral part of gamification, and people are trying to change certain behaviors within their industry or their organization, trying to get people to do what they want. They usually are good about listening to what I have to say, or at least, what my assessments are at a high level, and what can be done to make certain changes happen and certain behaviors come their way. So that's how I always refer to myself, and that's more of my background.
Okay.
What I would like to add to that is that I believe, and that's what makes a difference, that practice is more important than theory. You can put people in training classes for everything. You can have 2 MBAs, 3 MBAs, I don't care, but it's practice. And that's what gamification is actually all about. Practice something.
Okay. All right. So now that you've practiced it, you demonstrated your expertise, I'd like to talk about the idea of just implementing internal gamification strategy. When proposing internal gamification strategy, who often proposes the most resistance to the idea of implementing gamification? Or on the flip side, who is most willing to implement it? Have you seen? Sascha?
That's a hard question to answer, for me at least. So typically when you throw out the word or the idea of rewarding things with points, badges, leaderboards, it immediately people jump to conclusions and say, oh yeah, we're going to reward them with free iPads or free other devices, free stuff in general. I personally see a huge danger in this, that we should not put gamification equal to free stuff. I do firmly believe that we really need to focus, and maybe that is part of Loyalty 3.0, maybe Loyalty 4.0, who knows, on the intrinsic reward part and on the intrinsic motivation. I think free stuff, monetary rewards will only work so long. Once novelty wears off, they will actually have detrimental effects. So trying to focus on a sense of achievement or of responsibility will have much better turnaround in the end.
Good. Thomas?
So I haven't faced so much, I guess, outright resistance. I think it's more, I hear a lot of groups talking about gamification and saying we want to use it, but I think it's right now seen as this shiny new object, right? It's like, people say it's like social, a couple years back. It's a hot topic. People are like, oh yeah, we need to use gamification, but they don't really know what it means, and they don't know why they're using it, or what behaviors they're trying to drive, or how to apply it in the right context. So I think that's more where the discussion I usually have is, okay, well, what are you actually trying to accomplish? What are the behaviors you're trying to drive? And then figuring out, what does that mean in terms of what gamification would actually look like? Is that a series of games? Is it gamification mechanics and techniques? What does that look like, really?
I think the most resistance, and I hope I don't get into any trouble for saying this, but would probably be with their HR. I think they have the most resistance, and I don't blame them. There's a lot of different things that they have to look at, and they have to weigh down, around, what's legally what's okay, and financially what's viable, and all sorts of things. So it takes them a while to come around, but I think if explained well, and as long as it's meeting the objectives in the appropriate way, then usually they get on board. But definitely the most resistance there, and it takes the longest probably to get them on board. As far as who's most gung-ho about it, my experience, management has actually been really, really good about coming on board, because for them it's like, if we can find any efficient way to get people to do what we need them to do, then they're all for it. So of course there are different questions about how much is it going to cost us and all that, but I think, as again, it comes back down to just explaining it appropriately, applying it appropriately, explaining it to them. But for them, I think it definitely strikes a lot of interest just hearing, oh, we can make it more efficient? Okay, tell me more. So that's what I found in my experience.
Most resistance comes from the executives, however, and what I see at customers, because they're feeling the naked, which is not always that nice. Because it involves, certainly if you involve them, what is the best thing that you involve them in the game, is that they're feeling the naked because it involves role playing. It's more than the badges. I actually create games about banking processes or project management processes, and when they have a role in that, they're feeling the naked because that is not their comfort zone. And that's where the most resistance comes from.
I see. All right. So Thomas, I believe you have a lot of experience. Well, to preface this, generally when you're consulting for gamification, oftentimes it comes with some sort of software to go along with it to power all the points and badges, if you want to use that to go with it, right? So for Thomas, I'm interested in your input on this. When you want to use gamification software, how do you decide between using a established vendor and creating your own proprietary software?
Just go with the vendor. This was actually an interesting conversation with CIO about gamifying social collaboration. It's been a long, hard struggle and a lot of back and forth. First one part of our team wanted to build it, and they came back with some ridiculous estimates. And then one of our social vendors came out with this recognition module, which was very basic and rudimentary, and then it couldn't scale. And then we went back with CIO, and then they wanted to build it again. And CIO was just like, what's so hard about this? Right? It's just a bunch of badges. You set up a few rules. Like, we built our microblogging activity stream. We can build this, right? And you don't need a fancy admin console. Why spend all this money to get all the fancy bells and whistles? We'll set up like an email template. You email us the name of the badge and the rules, and we'll implement it. And so really, and they were kind of, we don't want to. We've had bad experiences working with vendors. We don't think they can scale to our size. We've had those types of issues with other vendors in the past. Really what changed their minds was having an actual a technical demo with one of the vendors, where we had the vendor walk through the technical architecture, what the platform involves, showing a demo of the actual administrative console and all the different features and the level of sophistication. And coming out of that meeting, CIO basically did a 180. They're like, the more I see this, the more I don't want to build it, right? It's the level of sophistication I think that the vendors bring and the amount of resources and time and experience they've invested, I think makes it, you definitely want to go with a vendor, at least in our case, especially with what we're trying to do. I think the only possible roadblock really after that is the price, right? Is it worth the price in terms of what the vendor is willing to offer you and what business value you think you're going to get out of it?
I mean, scalability is really a key point here. In my case, or in our case, with the program that I'm working on right now, we have a user base of 150. I don't want to go out and buy a system for that, obviously. I mean, maybe that's a general advice, but if you want to just try out something, try out on a smaller scale, right? I mean, why not with a group of 150 people, or maybe even with a group of 10, 20 people? And all you need are things that you already have. I mean, I think John Guerrero is going to speak later today, or maybe he's speaking right now, I don't know. He has gamified using Post-it notes. Now, you don't have to do Post-it notes in the office. You have maybe a spreadsheet that you can use. So the program that I'm building right now is entirely spreadsheet-based, right? And the publishing process for a leaderboard or for scores is manual work at this point. But why not? I mean, once we are into the program and we get the proper feedback and we're ready to scale it up, then we can still go out and think about larger systems.
I think the one other thing I would add is also working with a vendor. It's about creating a platform that you can then extend to other parts of the business, right? We don't want 10 different groups within Accenture building their own homegrown gamification platform or using different vendors. We want one platform that can be plugged into whatever system or whatever application you want to.
Okay. To speak more about scalability, clearly there are some problems with implementing strategies sometimes. Could any of the panelists speak to any strategies that you've implemented and then have failed? Can you sort of shed some insight on why that might have happened on these failed projects?
Well, for us, we've only had our division for about 1.5 years. So having researched what's going on in gamification up until now, we realized that, they say that 80% of gamified applications will fail. And why will they fail? Well, it's, goes to just not applying the right strategies, not building the game, if you will, the way it should be, not applying the right components. So we've been doing it really slow and really trying to understand what is necessary to have a successful application. So we want to be part of that 20% that doesn't fail. So we've just been actually really taking it slow and hoping to really just, ignore and neglect that other 80% of failure and be part of the more successful applications.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges this industry will face is bad or mediocre gamification, because I think there's a lot of that, and Accenture is no exception. I've seen some examples within Accenture where they try to use gamification and it was just so shallow and not really thought out. It's kind of like they just slapped something up there, they slapped a game, they didn't really put a whole lot of effort or thought into it. Now, at this point, while it's still early and it's still a bit novel, even kind of the core implementations actually can see some results. But that's not going to be the case for much longer, right? As this starts to permeate more through the industry, people are going to start seeing this more and more. You're not going to be able to get by with a poor implementation or poor design. And if it keeps going like that, I think players will eventually revolt. They'll be like, I'm sick of these points and badges. I've seen this before, right? So it's really, I think about looking to the future. I think it's really comes down to the science. I think as the economics, the psychology, I really believe science is the secret sauce of gamification. Right? You talk about technology, technology enables it. Culture is why it matters and is relevant, but science is why it works. The science of habit formation, science of motivation, behavioral economics, the psychology, and I think that's really where it's going to be headed, right? It's not going to be so much about points, badges, and leaderboards. It's about understanding the science behind it, why it works, understanding your players, and applying it within the right context.
And if I can add to that, it's really important to ask the right questions. When you look to gamify anything, make sure you understand who your target audience is. Make sure there's objectives that you're trying to reach, goals that you're trying to accomplish. Like Thomas was saying, you can't just slap points and badges and everything. It's not sustainable. And be sure that you have a lot of intrinsic incentives and rewards, also part of the, in addition to the extrinsic ones, because it's the intrinsic ones that we have found, as we experimented with it and started applying it into the different areas in our internal organization as well as for clients now, it's the intrinsic ones that really hold water. It's more sustainable. People like to be rewarded and recognized for what they accomplish. They like to see themselves progress, in the right way. So whether it's career development or attaining something substantial, they want to see that progression. So adding that healthy competition through gamification is a great way to do it. Just make sure you answer all the right questions before doing so.
Bart?
If I may add, don't forget to give feedback from the point of view of the company to the individuals, because even if you're on rank number 43, it adds value to the company. So the VP should call out to the employees saying, no matter if you're number 1 or number 43, you add value to the company. I'll give you one example. If you do a game on timely registration of timesheets, which is important, then A, you have to think indeed about a good game for that, and B, explain why it is important, why we should do this. And you should, VP, explain that if you do a timely registration of your weekly timesheets, then the billing goes out faster. Give them the purpose for the company, and then give feedback later on what they all add to that. Because if you're on number 43, you're not the winner, but exactly that point of view gives an extra value to the company, because he also helps the bills going out faster to customers. Give feedback.
Okay, well, we're running out of time soon, so I'd like to end on a little positive note. Panelists, if you could please provide a quick tip or insight on what it takes to successfully implement a gamification strategy within your company. One quick tip.
Why? Because that is when he says, maybe they don't know at all, because we give them some PowerPoint presentations, we give them some training courses, and they still don't know. Do a poll on that, whether they know the mission, and if all things fail, the training classes, the PowerPoint presentations, then you say, maybe we should try a game. Ask for the mission, and if everybody understands that.
Gamification is often used, or tried to be used, to change behavior. I think it's much easier and probably a better introduction if you just augment existing behavior instead of trying to change it.
I think it's just understanding your players or your audience and what motivates them.
All right, well, that about wraps up the consulting panel. Could you please, panelists, please reintroduce yourselves once more?
I'm Sascha Goto. I'm a senior program associate with McKinsey, and I'm working on an internal program which I'm gamifying.
Thomas Hsu from Accenture.
Naureen Meraj, Global Head of Gamification and Employee Engagement at NTT Data.
Bart Briers, Director of Services, CTG Europe.
And I'm Ivan Kuo, and thank you for coming to the panel.